January of 2024, I started my current offer. Since then, we've been able to scale to $1 million a year run rate. In the last 60 days, we've made over $200,000 in revenue. And in this video, I'm going to give you the 5 major lessons that I learned along the way so that you can use them for yourself and get the same results. So the very first lesson that I had to learn were that skills were more valuable than money, okay? And when you're just getting started, by charging a ton up front and by charging high ticket up front, you're making it more difficult to become better, okay? And in the long term, the person that's better is always going to win, okay? So I'm going to give you an example, and this was a little bit before I started my offer, and this is why I was able to achieve such explosive growth, was when I was just getting started, right? And this was about May of 2023, I was charging this like massive upfront, like $2K per month retainer for my services, right? And the issue was that no one really had any reason to believe that I was good at what I was doing, because I wasn't really good at what I was doing because I hadn't really done it for anyone yet, right? Now, the issue with that is when you keep doing this, you're spending all your time just learning, you're trying to get customers, you're just trying to get appointments, but you're not really doing anything because no one's going to actually be, like, very few people are going to be willing to pay that price to you if you don't have the credibility, right? And what I ended up doing, what really switched for me is, and about 5 months later, after doing this for 5 months, getting absolutely nowhere, I decided to start working on commission, working like after I got people results, right? And once I started doing that, I not only scaled that from 0 to about 10K a month in about 4 months from doing that. But what I really learned there, the reason why, the real value behind doing that, was I was able to get clients like crazy, okay? And when you have that in place, when you're able to get multiple clients every single week, you start to get a lot of practice, right? So it would be like asking people, like if you're trying to learn basketball, it would be like trying to get them to pay you to play on their team when you're just starting out, right? No one's going to pay you to do that. And in fact, if you're playing basketball and you're new, right, you have to pay the clubs to play, right? But it's like that. Like you get to help people to get your skills better without having to pay anything, right? Obviously, in the case of basketball, you don't necessarily have to, right? You can play on the street or whatever, right? I'm just using this as an easy example, right? But if you're taking on these clients, right, when you're just getting started, the point should be to get better so that you become good enough to be able to charge the high ticket price that you want to, right? And what I was able to do is I was able to get like 20 clients in like 2 months just on like pay on results, like just on commission, right? And what I was able to do from that is I was able to experiment, and I was able to try so many different things that I very, very quickly actually got good at what I was doing, so that in the next couple of months I could start charging more, and that's how I was able to get to that first point, that first 5-figure month. And once I had those skills, then I obviously developed that into the offer I have now, and that basically took me up until January. The second most important thing I learned, and honestly, this is the most important thing, it's just second in the order, right? Basically, what this is, okay, is the road to your goals has already been paved, right? The wheel that you're trying to make yourself, like the wheel has already been invented, and every single problem that you are going to have has already been solved, and you can solve it using the exact same way every single time, and that's by taking what already works from other people in your exact business model and applying those to your own, okay? So you probably have a number in your head, that's your goal, right? There's probably someone in your market doing the exact same thing that you are trying to do that has already done that, okay? So when it comes to, like, let's say you're not getting clients, right? The way to figure out how to get clients, look at the person who's already has like a 7-figure business inside of that exact same model that you have. Figure out how they are getting clients because you already know that works because it's working for them, and then use that for yourself. And that does not just apply to getting clients, that applies to everything. If you're struggling with service delivery, look into their program, jump on a sales call with the guy, figure out what they're doing with service delivery, why it's working so well. You can literally boil every single problem that you have down into like, what is the person that's making this work already doing, right? And I personally did that myself, right? Like in terms of building the product that I have now, in terms of building the service that I have now, it's really good. And it's good because I learned how to do it from someone who is already doing it super well in my exact market, right? And I'll give you an example of this that was super, super huge. So I'm actually friends with someone who does a very similar thing to me, helping agency owners with appointment booking, right? And we were like considered competitors, right? But we're friends, right? And we talk all the time, and we always share each other the best strategies, right? And I think we started talking sometime last summer, and we were both at around like 30 to 50K per month, and we both like doubled to tripled since then. And the reason behind that is because the market is so big, and there's so many different people inside of that marketing. Talking to your competitors is such a like, so many people like see this as like a negative thing, but it's actually one of the best things you can do. And what he was able to, like, we were obviously able to exchange a ton of value, but one of the biggest things is that I was doing all this Instagram outreach, right? And what I was doing is I was sending outreach automatically through Instagram. I was getting a bunch of appointments through that. I was getting like 50 appointments a month, something like that, right? And then what he was doing is I was talking to him, and he was using LinkedIn, and he was booking like 100 appointments at the time per month, and now he's booking like 250 appointments a month with that. And I was like, can you show me how to do this, right? And I showed him my Instagram thing that he also wanted to do, and he showed me his LinkedIn thing. And because of that, we were both able to double the size of our business, because I just didn't know what the best way to get clients for my niche was, right? And as soon as I talked to someone who was already slightly ahead of me in that domain, the only thing that I had to do is I just had to do what he was doing, and I got the same result that he was getting, right? And it's not something that you have to figure out the wheel. You figure out reinventing the wheel. Like, you have this goal. There is a way to accomplish it, and the way to doing that is by doing the exact same things that people have already done who have already achieved it. So the third lesson I learned was regarding hiring, okay? And it's basically the theme of this is systemizing before you delegate, okay? Now, one of the, this thing that people say a lot is hire where it hurts, right? And to some extent, I actually disagree with that, and I'll explain why I disagree with that in a second, right? So what a lot of people do is they hear that and they hire what they don't want to do because they don't like doing it, okay? When you say hire where it hurts, what you should interpret that as hire where you're spending the most low leverage time, okay? So I'm gonna break this down into a couple different sections here. So you should be able to look at your entire week, your entire month, and see every single task that you are doing and quantifying them by how much they make you per hour, right? So checking your emails is probably like, depending on like how valuable your emails are, right? It's probably like $10 an hour activity, right? Taking sales calls, probably like a $500,000 an hour activity, right? Like delivering services, right? It's probably like $1,000 an hour activity, right? Or $500 an hour activity, depending on how much time it takes you to do that, right? Now, what you can do then is you can take a look at all of those things. You see what's making you the least amount of money per hour, and if it's below your hourly rate, which you can find just by taking how much you make per month, and then dividing that by the amount of hours that you work, and then you find that. Anything that's below that, that is what hurts, right? Because that's what's low leverage and it's taking a lot of your time. That is what you need to hire out for, right? But what a lot of people do, and the mistake that I made, was I hired a sales rep because I didn't like doing sales, even though it's an extremely high leverage thing to do, right? Now, going back to the systemizing before you delegate thing, right, is I hadn't fully mastered sales. In fact, I hadn't even mastered sales at all. I think I had about like 10 deals under my belt on my offer, which is not that much, by the way. I was in a place where I was closing at like 10 to 15%. Like, it was pretty bad. And I just thought, well, if I hire someone who's great at sales, they'll be able to close higher than me, which was a stupid idea. Because when you're hiring people, this is the big difference that people get confused in. They hire people because they don't know how to do something, as opposed to hiring something to do something that is not as high leverage for you anymore, okay? So when it comes to hiring someone, right, to show you how to do something, that's where it comes into, like, that's where you get into territory of paying a ton of money, because you're paying for the person's expertise. But when you're hiring people like appointment setters and like sales reps and things like that, like these are not things that you need to pay someone that much money for. These are roles that you have to have systems for, that you have to train them on, okay? So what I then did later is, obviously, I had to fire the guy, and it wasn't his fault at all. It's because I didn't have a system, right? I didn't have a proper set of questions. I didn't have a proper set of objections, responses. I didn't have a proper pitch that was proven to convert at a certain percentage that I could give him, that I could train him on, that I knew inside out, that I knew worked, right? And because of that, obviously that didn't work out, and I lost tens of thousands of dollars because of that, okay? Now, once I actually figured out sales, right, this is the big difference. I brought on this guy who's now my current sales rep, and he's crushing it. And he didn't know anything about sales. He's maybe taken like 10 sales calls ever in his entire life, maybe a little bit more than that. He did like for his own agency, right? He knew absolutely nothing about sales. But because my system was so dialed in, I had like 30 recordings of me doing one call closings that I could just give him, right? I had like a script that was proven to work and convert at 35% by myself, right? I was able to give him a proven pitch, like every single objection response that I've been able to use to close like close to 100 deals at this point. I've been able to give him all of that. And because he has all of that information, it does not matter that he doesn't have the sales experience. The only thing that matters is he's put into his system, and as long as he can execute everything that is inside of there, and as long as I can train him on how to do that properly, he will do well. And now he's closing over 20%, which is fine. And he's like been with me for less than a month, right? So that is the biggest difference. And I had the same thing with setters. Like I hired a setter. He worked with me for a month. He got like one appointment, and now because I just brought him on a setter and like set me some appointments. It's not how it works, right? And then I went and did it myself. I built out the system. I built out the script. I built out the SOP. I built out the follow-up series. And once I actually did that and I ran it by myself and I proved that it would work, it's already proven to work. So you just put a setter in there. They do the exact same thing as you. They're going to get the same result as you, right? And that's the biggest difference is you have to, when it comes to these doing based roles, you really have to figure out how to actually do the thing yourself before you, and actually systemize it yourself before you can actually delegate it. The fourth thing I learned all comes down to leverage, okay? Now this is a word that's thrown around a ton, so I'm actually gonna like quantify this and basically explain what it means, right? So I need you to think of business and I need you to think of your company as a pipe, okay? And this was one of my mentors, Charlie Morgan, taught me this, right? But in when it comes to your business, right, you have the attention of your market, and that gets put through a series of pipes that's going to be converted into actual cash in your bank account, right? And what those pipes are, right, is like, for example, if you're doing appointment booking with DMs, right, you might have like one section where you have your attention of your market, and then the way you reach those is through your initial message, right? And if they're interested, then you send them the pitch in the DMs, right? That's the second pipe. And then you'll send them the calendar link, and then they book a call, and then you have to get them to show up, and then you have to get them to be a qualified prospect. Then you have to get them to hear the offer and like the pitch. Then you have to get them to handle the objections. Then you have to get them to close. Then you have to get them to, you have to actually deliver the service. And once you do all of those things, then you get the money, okay? So what you have to look for is in those series of pipes, you're gonna find inefficiencies, okay? So for example, one of my inefficiencies back in the summer was sales, right? So everything was going well. We were getting appointments, like we were getting people interested, we were getting people to show up, but I was closing at like 7%, right? Which is really, really bad. So once you have figured out the constraint, right? Anything that is not in that pipe, by the way, is typically just waste unless it's used to actually support what's going on inside of there. So like if building a website isn't part of that pipe, it's probably not a very good use of your time, right? But I digress, right? That's where you need to be focusing on. Once you figure out which pipe is the most inefficient, that should be your sole focus. That is your greatest point of leverage that you should put all of your time and energy into. And like when I say all of your time, like that has to be the one thing that you only focus on. Because if you can figure out that, you can like literally 5x the size of your business. Which is exactly what I did when I learned how to sell, okay? So what I did at this point, this was like June of 2020, June of 2024. Like my closing rate was like 7%, or maybe it was July. And then what I did, I was like, you know what, if I like take 6 sales calls a day, if I practice another 5 hours a day with like just practicing sales calls, if I like put my money into sales mentors, and if I only focus on this thing for the next few months, it becomes unreasonable that I'm not at least decent at sales. And that's exactly what happened, is in the next 3 months, I went from a 7% conversion rate to a 35% conversion rate, and that literally 5 times the size of my business, right? That's obviously like, that's how math works, okay? So that is like, that's what you have to focus on. Like when you have this stuff in place, like when you know what the bottleneck is, that needs to be your sole point of focus. And when you can do that, I can promise you will grow faster than you ever thought possible. Now, the fifth one is actually, you might not expect this, but this is the environment that you're actually in. Okay, so what I found is I was actually looking at my Stripe screen the other day, and I noticed that like there was these like ups and downs and ups and downs, and then like I broke this like loop, and then it just went like straight up, right? And I realized the reason why that happened was actually due to the environment that was in, and a lot of the time, right, because I come from a background of like me just being a degenerate, right? Being like some gamer League of Legends player in my room, right? And whenever I go back to my parents' house for the holidays, right? I'm actually here for Christmas, right? Which is a little bit ironic why I'm saying this right now. But when I when I'm out back at home, right, back in my hometown, I get all of these like I'm in that same environment, you know, that I was in, that I was like that had all these bad habits, doing all these bad things. And whenever I'm here, it's obviously I still work, right, but it becomes significant. And you probably resonate with this to some extent. It's a lot more difficult to work, not just in an environment where you've had those bad habits, and you've had like you're typically you're exposed to those like bad experiences that you've had, bad habits that you were doing before when you were in those places, right? It's kind of like putting someone who's trying to lose weight into like a pantry of chocolates, right? It's like the environment dictates so much of what's going to happen in there. There's not it's obviously you can control yourself, but it's significantly more difficult than if you were put in like a place where like the chef was making you clean food every day, and you were sitting in this like nice place with like a ton of gym equipment right in front of you. It would be so much easier for you to actually work out, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to work and business, right? Is if you're in a place that's inviting to actually work, right? You have like all these positive work experiences in that location and everything to that extent, it becomes so much easier. And whenever I was looking at the amount of revenue that I was making, it always was higher when I was in a location that was like conducive to work, and it would drop whenever I was in a location that was obviously not. And it's very interesting how that works. But that would just be one thing that I would be on the lookout for if you're in a place where you're like it's very difficult for you to work. Maybe you've struggled to like you want to change, and you've had a ton of bad habits in a certain place where you're doing stupid things, and like it's like you probably have one of those places that, you know what I mean. I would highly recommend getting out of there, so that you can actually focus and actually start fresh on the outcome that you want to achieve, because at the end of the day, you want to have every single advantage possible working in your favor to be able to get to those goals. And if that means moving locations, then it's probably the best thing to do. Okay, so other than that, that's all I had to share. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out. If you do happen to own an agency and you want help getting more qualified appointments, we're really good at that, and we book about 150 a month. So if you want help with that, you can click the link in the description. If not, I'll see you in the next one.